Welcome everybody to a new edition of Let's Do Lunch. Today is Monday, which is our business of streaming day. And we have a great show for you, which I'll introduce shortly. My name is Ned Sherman. I am a co-founder of Digital Media Wire and a partner at Manhattan Phelps and Phillips. A few announcements before we introduce our panel. First, next week is the LA Games Conference, so we will not be hosting Let's Do Lunch. But on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we have a really packed show, all online again this year. You can learn more about it at lagamesconference.com. Hope that a lot of you can make it out to that show. And now I'd like to introduce you to introduce yourselves in the chat. You can go to the bottom nav, pop open the chat, make sure to change the drop down to everyone rather than just panelists, so that everybody can see your posts. You can put in a little bit about yourself. It's a great way to meet people in this virtual environment. Also, if you have questions for the panel, please put them in the Q&A area, which is just to the left of the chat, just like Colin did there. Hey, Colin. Okay, so without further ado, let me introduce our panelists today. We have Randy Barbato and Fenton Bailey. They are the co-founders of World of Wonder. Welcome, guys. Great to have you on the show.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having us.
And our moderator today is Colin Dixon of Endscreen Media. Colin, great to have you back.
Thank you, Ned, and welcome Randy and Fenton, and welcome everybody. Please chat away on the chat. I've got the chat open and I'll be keeping a weather eye on that to see your comments as we discuss today. And I want to start off with a sort of general question. I've got a feeling that some of our audience may not be that familiar with World of Wonder, so I'd like to ask you guys to introduce World of Wonder to us. Tell us all about World of Wonder. Fenton, why don't we start with you?
Randy and I met at film school sometime in the 80s, so last century, and we kind of immediately started working together. And then we started World of Wonder 1991. We were in a band, kind of like the Pet Shop Boys. It was called the Pop-Tarts. And our sort of naive vision was that we would make tons of money from having pop hits that we would then use to make movies, because it was very hard to get into the film business in those days. There really wasn't an independent film business. And but in fact, when we started World of Wonder together, I guess the word now is pivoted. We'd pivoted to TV. And the very first series we made was a series called Manhattan Cable, where we licensed clips from what are known as public access shows, which is just shows that people can make on their own at home and take down to the cable network, and they air on Manhattan Cable. And we made a show called Manhattan Cable. That was really the beginning of World of Wonder as we know it.
Randy, you want to pick up the story? That's, I think, funnily enough, I was in a band, I think, about the same time. So with probably the same aspirations.
Yeah,
Randy.
Well, the band was a huge failure, I'll add. But yeah, it's interesting. Our first series was very much, Manhattan Cable really was the spirit, is really what our company is all about. I mean, it was sort of YouTube before YouTube. It was user-generated content that we repackaged and was the beginning of World of Wonder. And we've gone on to produce television and documentaries, non-scripted, some scripted. And the thing that we've been throughout our 100-year history is just sort of fiercely independent. I mean, we really only work with and produce content that we're incredibly passionate about. And when Fenton and I first started in the 80s, we lived in the East Village in New York, and we were incredibly passionate about drag queens. And we still are. We used to go to a small bar called the Pyramid Club, and we were fascinated by all the incredible drag queens there, and wondered why they weren't on television, why people didn't know who they were, and that fascination continues to this day.
So you've obviously you keyed into something that was actually a passion for a lot of people, given RuPaul's Drag Race's success, which we'll get to in a little bit here. So you actually did start to produce stuff for cable TV. Tell us about that. Were you producing just shows and licensing it to cable television? Did you run channels? Tell us about that.
Well, Manhattan Cable, we licensed clips from other people's shows. And the reason that we kind of stumbled on that idea was that we'd had our own public access show for a few episodes and quickly found out that we would sooner actually aggregate other people's content because some of it was just so much better. It was, I would say all of it actually was better than what we were doing. But at the same time, as Randy says, we were like going out around the East Village and seeing the drag queens performed. And I think we always felt that there was something really enormous there. I mean, look, you know, this was the mid 80s. The East Village was a sort of stewing pot. What is the word? Melting pot, right? I mean, it was very gay. It was very avant-garde. It was very artsy. East Village art was sort of beginning to emerge. So you had these two trends. On the one hand, it was very punk. It was all right doing it yourself. But then on the other hand, it was the 80s, it was the roaring 80s, it was Reagan, it was about money and success, fame, glamour, you know. So it was slightly more commodified than just sort of giving the finger to the system. It was about really doing something. And I think so much creativity came out of that time and that place. And we were just lucky to be there.
Right. And yeah, go ahead, Randy.
No, I was just going to add, and there was this intoxicating mix of high and low that was really intriguing to myself and Fenton. And so we started producing content. Our first series we sold to Channel 4 in the UK. And we were, on the one hand, we were, packaging these public access shows, but we were also doing, starting to make documentaries, and they were, really focused on more serious subject matter. I mean, we were, obsessed with the camcorder revolution that was just starting to happen. And we did a documentary, Video Vigilantes and Voyeurism, for Channel 4 in the UK, which ultimately HBO picked up. And that's when we started producing docs for Shill and Evans and HBO. So I think
one of the seminal events in our life was the Rodney King tape, because seeing that tape was so shocking. I think everybody who saw it was shocked. But then we were like, my gosh, the whole world is seeing this almost instantaneously. Okay, it was a few days after the beating, but almost instantaneously. And then when the jury acquitted the police officers, after everyone had seen that tape, that guy being beaten within an inch of his life, you had the LA riots. And we were like, this is a revolution. This is a video revolution. And it was all completely different to everything we'd read and been told, 1984, it's going to be a totalitarian surveillance place. That's not how it turned out at all. And yet it has been a complete transformation of our lives. So we've always been interested in television and media, I guess, in particular, and what we've come to call the screen age, because I think what was beginning, funnily enough, with public access and the explosion of satellite and cable, all in that same period of time, was the sort of the building of this screen age and this very sort of media saturated society where we're all spending all our lives more or less in front of a screen of one sort or another all the time.
So let's talk about that for a little bit, because obviously RuPaul was born in the pre-internet, pre-streaming world, and has really flourished now in that world. So let's talk about how digital has really changed changed your business.
Well, drag is truly an inspiration, because a drag queen will often, it's not just that they perform, it's not just the hair, the makeup, the heels. That's one piece of it. So they're like singing and dancing, lip syncing and doing the hair and the makeup. That's one piece. The other piece is they're building an audience. They're building a following. They've created a brand. And in many ways, they foreshadowed, I think, drag queens and club kids and so much of this subculture foreshadowed what's going on in social media, which is selfies, self-branding. And it's not about, the gender fluidity thing is more about, I can create an avatar of myself. I can be anything I want to be. And I can then monetize that and make that a business rather than working for the man, So I think
it's like the technology caught up with the drag queens. Rue was a star and a digital star before the digital landscape that we know now existed. He was putting his face on public access, and out wheat pasting posters of himself. So I think a lot of the way we approach our business and have built World of Wonder, it's always been with that spirit of like, just make it and put it out there, and so much of our stuff, I mean, we're fortunate enough to work for a lot of networks and outlets and produce content for them, but also we independently produce a lot of stuff, docs and stuff for our streaming service. But we've always kind of been driven by that starving kitty indie spirit that really, I think now finally this landscape is kind of designed for.
Right. It seems that, digital seems perfectly suited to this idea of growing your brand, but more importantly, growing the community around that brand, right? So this is, and I think that World of Wonder content appeals to a very passionate community. Talk about how you're bringing community as sort of a central part of the experience of World of Wonder and the shows that you produce.
Well, I think, one of the things about Drag Race is that it may not have the biggest audience, but it is, I think, the second most socially engaged show in all of television. I think maybe Game of Thrones beat us, but I think that's interesting that it isn't a sit back and watch experience. It's kind of what they used to say, lean forward experience. And I just think that thanks to the way technology has evolved, we can all be connected in ways that previously weren't possible. And I think that one of the fascinating things about the screen age is it isn't, Andy Warhol said, in the future, everyone will be famous for 15 minutes. What I think he actually meant was that everybody who's been excluded or people on the margins or in the shadows, they will be famous because they are motivated to be seen after however many generations or whatever experience they've had of being ignored and of being invisible. And so the screen age provides this visibility. And I think that is the community. And that's, a lot of people say a lot of things about television and whether it's good for you or whether it's bad for you, but really, it's not like television is any of those things, but what it does do is it connects people and gives them a shared experience. And I think, for example, a film we made years ago, The Eyes of Tammy Faye, is all about that because we weren't necessarily ourselves, but we weren't interested in televangelism in terms of getting people to give money to be saved. But Tammy Faye was someone who really had an understanding of how media and especially television works. And she was actually true to everything we've been saying so far, kind of a drag queen. She said she was a drag queen herself, with the eyes and the makeup, so I do think there is a certain, and she was really all about connecting with people and creating a sense of community of people, of making people feel welcome, even though they're alone and isolated at home watching TV.
And I think for us, this sense of community is what World of Wonder is all about. And we've always been about amplifying voices and stories of people who are considered outsiders or marginal, from, you know, the Eyes of Tammy Faye to Party Monster, to the drag queens of Drag Race, who, you know, who on the surface appear to be, you know, on the margins because their stories, you know, haven't always been on TV or accessible. But then when you get to know them and you connect with them, they seem so familiar. They seem like part of your family. And I think increasingly, you know, I mean, that's who, you know, that's how and why we relate to them, and why our community has sort of like grown, and we have this sort of strong bond because it's what we have in common. I think what people look to World of Wonder for, and we, you know, whether it's Wow Presents Plus, our streaming service, whether it's DragCon, our, you know, our live event and convention, we are looking to continue to grow that community experience and to provide opportunity, whether it's stories, whether it's events, whatever it is, which, you know, partially it's a business model, but also like it is always driven by passion for us, because so many of the things we do, including the streaming service and the, you know, the convention, we didn't know how to do that. We just did it.
We just learned. You know, that's such an interesting point, Randy. And I think it's so true that it's not just a question of connecting these people who felt like that they were on the outside. It's actually an opportunity to expose that community and the things that excite that community to other people and get them excited about it too. I've seen that in, for example, with services like Crunchyroll, with the anime community, where it seems like that has been able to really grow a tremendous amount. An interest, you know, an old git like me in something like Cowboy Bebop, for example, where I would probably not have ever stumbled across that. That seems like a really beautiful thing to really help amplify and grow the content, and you can grow with that growth as well, right?
Well, yeah. And what's amazing about it is when you realize how much you have in common when the community is growing, people are joining it that you would think, wait, like, what are you, you know, the first DragCon we had, when we saw the people who showed up, it was like, wow, like all these kids, all these, like, it was just surprising. It was not what anyone would expect that community necessarily to look like, for example. And it was there's something really special about that, because I think increasingly we are so alienated from one another. We're all hiding behind our screens. You know, the pandemic didn't help. So being able to sort of to connect, you know, in all different ways, but especially physically, is really pretty magical.
Yeah. Yeah. Can we sort of dive into a little bit of the nuts and bolts of the impact of digital on your business? Well, one of the things that we discuss a lot in our business is peak TV, and the fact that there are so many original series made now. It's created a crunch on resources. It's created a crunch on talent. And it's also created inflated prices for licensing of that content. How has that impacted you? Are you able to make the shows that you want to make still? Are they still affordable to make? And are you seeing lift in when you go to license those shows?
Well, yeah, no. I mean, I think it is, people talk about peak TV, and I suppose looking back historically, cable and satellite was kind of like the Big Bang. And so we think that there's a ceiling, but I don't believe there is. I think more is more. You know, how many hours of uploaded to YouTube every week or every day or every minute? You know, hundreds of thousands of hours. I get the idea that there should be some sort of ceiling to it because quality is going to get diffused or diluted and resources are strained. But I just see that more and more and more and more and more, even more than right now, we're going to be living on our screens, interacting on our screens, doing stuff on our screens. And so I think it is infinite, ultimately, really.
Yeah.
And when and then given that, you emerge, all these different kinds of tiers emerge. You have your premium, and you have your documentaries that have been booming recently, and you have webisodes. You have every kind of imaginable format that fits within that ever exploded. The universe is expanding, Colin. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Is the feedback you're getting on shows now more direct? Are you like, obviously you can get viewing data, actual viewing data from the services that you provide the content in. That's one thing, but there's also the social feedback that you're getting on content. How influential is that on you in creating a new show, or maybe canning an existing show and putting your resources elsewhere?
It doesn't have a lot of impact on us, to be honest. I mean, that's probably why we're so independent. And it might not be the best. Like, we make what we want to make. And if we're not slaves to the algorithm. We never will be. And we don't really read. We try not to have comments interfere with what we're doing.
I mean, everyone's got an opinion.
Not like, pardon me?
I was gonna say, everyone's got an opinion now, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
and it's not like, it's not being disrespectful. It's just more like we just want to produce, and we want to, and not everything is going to be everyone's cup of tea. And yeah.
And data is great, but it by definition only tells you what people have done, and so it doesn't tell you what people will do. And everybody takes data, this past record, and says, well, now it's going to tell us, because of that, it's going to tell us what people will do. And it just doesn't make any sense. It's like trying to drive a car looking in the rear view mirror. It doesn't, it's like you'll probably crash, you know. I don't know that data's that, the almighty algorithm is such a great way to go.
Yeah. So so it sounds.
I mean, imagine if our conversation we were having right now was I was getting data on what people were thinking and what you were thinking, and then I changed what I was going to say. But I can only really say what I think should be said.
I mean, even when it comes to like development of shows at World of Wonder, whether it's shows that we're going to try and package and go out to a network or an outlet, or shows that we're going to like reach into our pockets and produce independently. We sit around, we talk about it. It's the ones that we're personally just the most passionate about, the ones that we can get excited about, because it's so much work to make stuff. It's so exhausting. And you really only want to be doing the stuff that excites you, that you're gonna stay up all night tweaking about. And we're not young spring chickens anymore.
Yep. So let's talk about World of Wonder Presents Plus, which is your digital offering, your SVOD service. When you launched that 3 years ago, talk about what you were trying to achieve there, and where you see it going, where you're driving that. And I'm really interested in about your original strategy for that service. So who wants to start with that?
Well, I think when we launched Wow Presents Plus, we'd always been, we had tried to develop some sort of online applications ourselves earlier, and realized quite soon enough that actually building something from scratch was like just not we weren't likely to succeed at that. And then, but what we wanted was a place where all the RuPaul's drag races and the drag races around the world could exist in one place together. And we were also impatient and excited about spin-off programming, because we felt that the artistry and the talent that we were discovering in Drag Race outside of the show, there were more opportunities to make more shows around Painted with Raven or Trixie and Catches. You know, there were just so many things we wanted to do. And we were frustrated only to the extent that we realized that capacity on cable, that they were still thinking, oh, well, you know, Drag Race is a fluke. Drag Race is an anomaly, you know. And we were just like, we've been doing this for so long. We know that drag works on TV. They're like peanut butter and jelly. They are purpose built for one another in the sense that it's a small screen, but the makeup and the artistry of a drag queen, it's about big impact. And that again goes back to, you know, Tammy Faye's successful secret of her look, you know, so we were just impatient to do stuff. And because we had gone to film school and worked in video, we sort of knew the ways to make shows without having to spend a huge amount of money on them, especially if you took out the network piece of all the notes, all the revisions, all the changes. They take a show, they go market research it, they tell you it's not going to work, you have to change the whole thing around. You end up often for a network making a show 5 times over because everybody's got to say, you recut it, you rejig it. So if you cut out all that, actually the amount that you actually need to spend can be considerably less. And so we thought by being resourceful and ingenious and flexible, we could make some really good original shows in addition to put alongside Drag Race.
And it's the kind of the formula has worked because we knew we had this engine, the international formats of Drag Race, which now there are 13 iterations that in one form or another are living on WoW Presents Plus. And we knew that we could bit by bit start to produce more and more original content, either from talent from these shows or adjacent, because we are building our doc. We have all of our documentaries are on there. So it's the engine and the adjacent content. This year we'll double our original content than we produced from last year. We've had growth every single year. We have a 93% retention rate of our subscribers. I mean, there's a real commitment to the channel. And, for us, like Fenton said, being able to be economical. I mean, even when we're working for any networks, we're always working on something we love. So we try and put it on the screen, so the intention is to just keep growing it. And we are getting a little bit more aggressive about it in terms of the original content. We're on our 2nd season of Painted with Raven, which we just finished shooting. We just finished a pretty ambitious dating show for us and for WoW PP. And we've got we have a bunch more shows that we haven't announced yet that I can't go into the details of, but they're shows that we might ordinarily bring out and sell. But we've decided to keep them at home because we figured out economical ways to produce them.
It sounds like you've created a pretty compelling product. If you've got 93% retention, that's that's a pretty enviable statistic, I think, among SVOD services. So the content flow that you're providing here is obviously very compelling to the audience. You mentioned documentaries. I think documentaries is one of the areas that's particularly benefited from the digital revolution, for the streaming revolution. Talk to us a little bit about your strategy there and how you see documentary consumption on the service.
On our service or in general?
Well, in general, but also specifically on WoW PP.
Well, in general, we're just living in a great documentary age, I mean, Andy Warhol was perhaps the original ultimate documentarian. He documented everything, and I think that, sort of roundabout then with the American Family, I mean, that was like the first. People talk about reality and documentary. They're not really that different. They're all unscripted or real storytelling. And yeah, it's a huge amount of documentaries. I mean, I think sometimes some stories get pushed to the side in this current time and aren't considered worthy of being told, you know, even though there's a lot more documentaries than there ever were. I mean, gosh, there was a time when Randy and I were early in World of Wonder when I think HBO was the only place making documentaries, and that's not the case, you know.
For us, like, it's funny, there has been this big boom, and a lot of what people want are like crime documentaries that you can spread over 8 episodes. And so you get a lot of those drone shots of the town. And it does sometimes feel like people are stretching the material. You know, but for us, we continue, you know, to do the documentaries that often other people aren't that excited to buy, which is fine. If we can figure out a way to produce it. We did one, you know, Frida's Got a Gun, about, you know, sort of gun control, and specifically about New Orleans, with Big Frida's personal experience woven into them. And we just did a great doc about the East Village artist David Wojnarowicz, which was directed by Chris McKim. The other great thing for us is World of Wonder is really all these amazing artists who work there. It's not just the community that we produce for, it's the community we produce with. And so sometimes for us, being able to figure out a way to cobble together funds and produce something independently, knowing in the end, if we can't sell this, we have a home for it. Right. Or when we do sell it, we build in that it ends up at Wow Presents Plus.
So in a way, it sounds like Wow PP is like has been liberating for you, because it's given you an opportunity now to, you don't have to, in a way, you don't have to worry about selling a show. Of course, you want to sell the shows, but if you don't, you have an outlet for it where you know you have a ready audience who'll be interested to watch it.
Yes, and I think something else that's interesting is that I think maybe it used to be that something would live in one form, you know, like, so it would be a documentary or it would be a narrative feature. But I'm seeing increasingly one idea can be in many forms, you know, like Party Monster was a documentary we made early on, and then we made a movie, Party Monster, a movie version of the documentary. Eyes of Tammy Faye was a documentary made, and it's been turned into a movie. And I think increasingly we're seeing that these stories can exist in multiple forms. And so something that may only exist in a moment on Wow Presents Plus may also in future exist in another form somewhere else, in another form as well, you know? So it's almost like IP is a bit like planting a seed, right? And it just grows, hopefully, into a massive, mighty oak tree. I mean, not everything does. This tree, you know, not everything survives, but you know,
you got to throw it out there and see if it sticks. So let's talk a little bit about the live events, and I'm really interested in how you're leveraging digital to amplify DragCon. Very successful live event for you, as you said earlier. So how does digital fit in with that event? How are you leveraging it?
I can jump in with a little of this. A good example is some of the stuff we're doing this year. This year's really the first year that we are having a record number of international drag queens on the floor at DragCon. We haven't been able to hold the event the last 2 years, but we've still been producing versions of Drag Race all over the world. So they'll all be under the same roof. We're doing various reunions of different casts, like the Spanish show or the Italian show. Also, the American season 12 and 13, which their reunions we had to do digitally for linear television. So it'll be, we'll be producing those panels. We'll be filming those panels. They will, they'll be turned around and living on Wow Presents Plus, so people will be able to, who can't come to DragCon, will be able to enjoy those. And also, you know, the panel rooms, I don't know, maybe you could fit 800, 900 people in there. So a lot of people at DragCon won't be able to experience those panels, and they're going to be hot tickets. So we're sort of, you know, we're providing for people who come to DragCon, and then it will live on digitally.
On Wow Plus.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like that's really interesting. So Wow Presents Plus is you're using that to sort of give the DragCon a life, both an additional life, both during the con, but during DragCon and after. So yeah.
And then on the inverse of that, sorry but just like on the flip side of that, there are other kind of Wow PP, you know, already established shows that some of that talent will be doing panels. Or there will be various events there and Instagram opportunities that are anchored in the different IPP on Wow PP. So IPP, did I say OPP?
You did say IPP.
I know, but now I'm not, you know, OPP. So sort of it's again, it's all about like extending the experience and the opportunities, and for people who are connecting with the talent, with the content, to get even closer. You know, and of course, all the queens are there, and many of them have booths, and they're out there on the floor. You know, for them, it's an opportunity to you know, to pocket some coins, and also though to connect with the fan base.
Yep. Okay, so let's look to the future here. How are you seeing? How do you see the market, the video market specifically, evolving from here? And then let's talk about what some of your plans that you're comfortable talking about, of course, what some of your plans are for 2022 and beyond. So let's start with where you see the market. Fenton, what do you see happening with the market this year?
Well, I don't know. Like, no, I mean, I think you're going to have your mega streamers, right? And they're going to be battling it out over there for Lord knows how long to come, throwing billions of dollars at being the dominant person. And I don't think Wow Presents Plus is really about that at all. I don't like the word niche. I think because it implies small. I would say instead we're specialty. And we're right now in a not particularly crowded field. There are others out there. But I think that we're pretty confident that we have a sensibility that is unique and different to the others. And so I just see that growing. And there will be this battle of titanic forces, you know, who can afford to lose. But CNN Plus, right? They just pulled the plug on CNN Plus.
Yeah.
What did they spend? $300 million? I don't know how you do that in however much time they did. But no, I mean, what I'm saying, Randy, is there are big forces out there with tons of money to just burn on things.
Yes.
Like Quibi, $1.5 billion on Quibi. That's not our lane. You know, we're not coming from Netflix, and we're not even coming for the other specialty channels. We're just growing the one that our specialty channel, curating it, and that it feels like a sensibility and an experience. And an example of that is we're launching, is it May 14th, Randy? A line of pre-mixed cocktails, House of Love cocktails. And part of the when you buy the cocktails, you can also get an early access, an all access pass to Wow PP, so that it's like, you know, they're adjacent things, and you can be drinking your mocktail or your cocktail while getting all these sneak peeks of what's coming to Wow PP in the next few months.
So all the data I'm seeing is suggesting that people are migrating now pretty quickly towards digital. So I'm just looking at Comcast numbers, and they've lost 1.7 million pay TV subscribers in the last 4 quarters. Randy, do you feel like you're in a pretty good position now as your audience and adjacent audiences give up the traditional world and move to digital? Do you think you're well positioned?
I think we are. And I do think like we just have to keep focusing on the content and the quality of the content. At the end of the day, that like content still rules. And so as we're watching like the equalization of the stream, not the equalization of the streaming, but all, you know, what's happening with Netflix, I think everybody was waiting for that moment, like, because it didn't seem like that could continue.
Yeah,
and
had to happen.
That's also, it also feels reminiscent of like what we watched when cable first started. And, you know, we're old enough to remember like when it was exploding and it was like, how can this continue? And, you know, so that's going to happen with streaming. And meanwhile, like we're just doing our thing. We're kind of minding our own business, building our own thing and responding to that audience and, you know, trying to expand it, but not desperately. We're just trying to continue to make the sort of stuff we want to see, thinking that this tribe will, you know, there's a good shot they might want to see it as well. And we have this sneaking suspicion, we always have, from 100 years ago when we were like, you know, I mean, a big part of it has to do with being queer, and it's less about queer from like a gay who you sleep with point of view. It's more about having a queer perspective on life and thinking that there are a lot of people who shared that with us, who were straight and gay and whatever in between. And so that's a long answer to yes, I think we're well positioned.
Well,
yes.
I think it's you know, I was just looking at one of the questions in the Q&A, and the question was, you know, talking about targeting this consumer, and I suppose the assumption is that this consumer is LGBTQ+. But what we've learned is that actually most of the people who watch Drag Race don't identify as LGBTQ+. And most of the people who come to DragCon aren't LGBTQ+. So this consumer is actually kind of any consumer. And that's what we saw. That was what the great thing about doing DragCon was, that we actually got to meet the audience and see them. And they don't look anything like what TV demographics tells you they should look like or who they're supposed to be. People don't stay in their lane, and people are more curious than they're ever given credit for. And so ultimately, I think, you know, we've got a small channel, a specialty channel, but, you know, there's 7.9 billion people in the world. And okay, even if 790 million LGBTQ+, that's still good enough for us, you know. But actually, I think more than LGBTQ+ people want to watch Drag Race and the shows on Represents Plus.
That's very clear. Yeah.
You know, we're not.
I mean, it seems to me like this idea of being a maverick, of being different, and celebrating that is, I think, a key value that you're providing to the market. This maverick spirit. And it responds, a lot of people respond to that who aren't in the classic areas where you would expect them. It's just
yeah,
just
we were
simple.
talking to a channel the other day about a show, and they said, you know, the thing about our viewers is, and this was really surprising, they said to us, our viewers aren't this or that. Then the one thing that most of them seem to be passionate about is being entrepreneurs and building a brand and doing their own business. And I thought that was really, I've never heard a TV executive say that before or recognize that, or it was really a revelation because normally it's like, yes, our market is 1834 or this or that or that. But they said, we suddenly realized that actually what all the viewers we have in common, and it's not a business channel, it's a music and youth channel, you know. And it was just really interesting. And I think that social media had something to do with that, the people are creating their own brands. They are their own channel, you know.
Yeah. We're just about out of time, Randy and Fenton. This has been a fascinating conversation. I really thank you for coming on. I hope you'll come back and talk to us again and let us know how things are going. Really a fascinating conversation. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us. It's been really nice talking to you. Thank you.
And Ned, we're going to hand it back to you.
Thank you, Colin. And Fenton, Randy, really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for coming on the show. Thanks to the audience for all your thoughtful commentary and questions throughout the show. It's always great to have an engaged audience for these shows. Let me just mention, tomorrow we have Vivid Labs on the show for our series on NFTs. So please join us, same place, same channel tomorrow at noon Pacific. All right, thanks everybody. Have a great day.